What's going on, fellow Photoshop enthusiasts? My name is Eddie, and today I'm gonna create a tutorial on everything you could possibly need to know about the newest version of Photoshop when it comes to the crop tool. So let's get right into it. Once you have an image pulled up, you simply navigate to this left-hand panel, and you can either click on the crop tool icon or simply click the shortcut key C. I prefer to click C on my keyboard, and you'll see that a crop window appears. Now, you'll also notice there's white manipulation handles throughout the crop window. What you can do is you can start clicking and dragging these around until you are happy with what you're trying to crop. So for this example, let's say we're attempting to crop around Jesse Ruben's face, and I'll cover who Jesse Ruben is later on in the video. What you can do is you could reposition it so it's relatively around his face. Then you can click on the actual window, and you could see that you can drag the window around. You can also use your keyboard left, right, up, and down to do very small changes. Now, if you click Shift and then press left, right, up, or down on your keyboard, you'll see that the jumps are slightly bigger than if you simply just click the right, left, up, and down keyboard. So now that we understand that, let's see how to complete this crop. We can either click this check mark here, or we can hit Enter. I prefer to use keyboard shortcuts, so I'll click Enter. And you'll see that we've effectively cropped the image. Now let's go back and cover what the other couple of icons here were. So let's hit C. And now let's go and reposition it so it's around his face. And if we ever want to reset things, we can simply click on this reset icon here. And if we are cropping and for some reason we realize we want to change something first, we can escape out of the crop at any time by clicking on this escape icon here, or escape on your keyboard. Again, I prefer shortcuts, so let's just hit escape on the keyboard. And we're back to where we originally were. By the way, Jesse Ruben, he's a friend of ours, a client. He's a super talented singer-songwriter. If you're into that kind of music, please follow him at Jesse Ruben on Facebook, Instagram. He was just signed to Universal Records, so he's well on his way, and we absolutely love him. Go, Jesse. So back to the tutorial. If we're trying to select around his face, we can simply click and drag, and you'll see that a window appears, and we can position it around his face. Now, if we let go, what we can also do, if you hold down the space on your keyboard and you move it around, you can see that you could reposition the entire window. Now, if you release everything and you escape out of it for a second, as you're clicking and dragging a window, if you press the space bar, you'll see that you can actually move this window around. And this is helpful if we were to create a window and we thought this is a good size, but now we want his face to fit in there. We can simply create it, hold the space bar, and try to fit it around his face. So let's now cover what the ContentAware Fill area outside the original image does. It's this icon here. So if I go ahead and I start cropping this, but I decide to crop outside the original image because let's say my aspect ratio is calling for it. So if I try to crop this and I hit the check mark, we're either going to get transparent pixels or white pixels outside of it. So right now you could see that it's just transparent pixels. However, I can try to crop it so that Photoshop wisely fills in the image based on what the image is here. So it will simply do guesswork to stretch out the image. Let's see how that works. So I'll go ahead to crop it, and now's a good time to mention that if you hold down and press the Alt key and you start stretching out an image, you can actually do it from the center, and you don't have to worry about this side being equal to this side. It will always be equal if you are pressing the Alt key and trying to manipulate the crop window. So if we press this ContentAware Fill, before hitting the check mark or enter, you will see that the Photoshop will fill these outside areas with what it believes should be in the image. So let's see how that works. We hit the check mark, It will take Photoshop a couple of seconds to do the algorithm. And let's see if we like the result. Boom. This is beautiful. This actually worked out beautifully for this picture. So as you can see, it's very, very useful to sometimes use the ContentAware Fill. One thing to mention even before I speak about rotating is sometimes when you're trying to crop things, you'll see, so if we just want to move this over a little bit, Photoshop isn't letting us. It kind of snaps it to the end of the picture. And that's exactly what that feature is called. It's called snap. So what I'm trying to say is, let me zoom in by doing Control plus or Command plus on Mac. If I just want to move this over a few pixels, Photoshop's not allowing me to do that. It's snapping to the edge. You can go to View and turn the snap off, or you can use the shortcut key Shift Control plus. And now you'll see that you are able to just separate it out by a few pixels, and you'll be able to crop it if you so please. So let's now cover when else is a very helpful time to use the ContentAware Fill area. If you're going to crop a picture, you have the option to actually rotate the image. Now, if you rotate the image around, it's important to note that because pixels are small squares, if you rotate the image around, it's actually, the algorithm of Photoshop is going to change every pixel to be a square again. Because right now, if we move it around, it's going to be a diamond. We need it to be a square. So it's very helpful to note that you don't want to do many rotations. So if we crop this, we don't want to crop it again and again and again when rotating. Otherwise, the quality of the image will be lower. So let's say we're here and we kind of we rotated the image and we expanded it a bit. If we hit the check mark, we'll see that what happens is we now get these empty spaces here. In order to address that, what we should have done is we should have rotated it, extended it out, and simply hit on the ContentAware Fill and hit the check mark. Again, Photoshop will do its math, and it's going to fill this area and this small area here and this small area there with what it deems to be fit. As you can see there, that's why the letters are crooked, because we rotated it. Another thing to point out when rotating an image, so if you bring your cursor out here when rotating, it works well. However, if your cursor is all the way out here, you don't want to see the pointer, because if you click, it'll simply do the crop operation. So we'll Control Z. So if you click to crop, you want to make sure you're seeing the rotate signal so that you can rotate. And the reason it's not rotating outside of the actual image is because it doesn't think that you want to do that. So if you want to extend out, you have to drag one of the manipulation handles. So let's X out of that. When you're rotating an image, if you shift and drag the cursor, so if we're shifting and dragging, we'll see that it actually moves in 15, 30, in 15 degree increments. So it goes from 15 to 30 to 45 to 60 to 75, and this is helpful if we want to rotate at 90 or 180 degrees. So let's escape out of that and let's discuss what this is. Now, this determines if the pixels outside the crop box is retained or deleted. What does that mean? If I click on this and I move it over and then I uncheck this box and I hit OK, you'll see that we cropped this, but if we then go to extend it out, these pixels were not deleted, so they weren't permanently deleted. We can still shift it out and simply go back to where we were. However, if we click on the image and then we decrease the crop window, and then we do click on this icon, it will delete all the pixels that are outside of this crop window. So if we click enter, we will now see that if we try to crop again, we don't see those pixels. They are permanently deleted. Of course, nothing's really permanent. In Photoshop, you can always go back and Control Z and reverse the changes. So let's now discuss what this settings icon covers. So if you want to enable the crop shield, you can actually disable it. What does that mean? When we go to crop, you'll see that there's no color difference outside of it. I like to keep it because I think it's helpful. Now let me show you what I mean. If we enable the crop shield, and you can adjust the opacity, you can make it darker, lighter, you can match the canvas, you could choose a custom color. What this means is when we go to crop, you'll see that the other section is dark, and you can actually adjust the opacity. So let's say for you it's too dark, you can make it 18, you can make it closer, but it's always helpful to see the window is brighter and everything else darker, in my opinion. Also, what we can do is we can toggle the auto center preview. And let me explain to you what that is. So if we go to crop Jesse's face here, if we just do this, you'll see it doesn't move. But sometimes it's helpful, especially if it's a large image, to have the auto center preview on, because that way, if we're just looking at the S letter, if we select it, it will now jump into the center of our screen and we can focus on it better. This is, personal preference, and you could play around with these different icons here. If you're used to using the old Photoshop, you can even switch to the classic mode. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to X out of this. Also, it's showing that you can either show the cropped area or you can not show the cropped area. And you can also preview this by clicking H when cropping. So for instance, I can click on Jesse's face, and if I hit H, I'll see what it will most likely look like, and if I hit H again, it will bring me back to the screen. So let's escape out of that, and now that we understand what the settings do, let's cover this grid overlay option for the crop tool here. If we click on it, now it might seem like there's a lot of geometry and trigonometry involved here. Don't be intimidated, it's actually quite simple. All it's saying is you can choose the grid that you see when you go to crop things, and you can adjust that grid as well. Now, if you're a Photoshop expert and you work a lot with geometry and you want to be super surgically precise, this is going to be helpful for you. For others, it's personal preference, what they want to see when they go to crop an image. And also, you can toggle some of these options so you can never show overlay, and that way you will never see that overlay. I prefer to just auto show overlay, and that's basically how this grid overlay option works. Now let's cover straighten. This is actually a very helpful tool if you are working with horizon lines. So if we were looking at a beach and the sky started here and the sand here and it was crooked, so let me show you an example by just twisting this around a bit. So let's say this was our image, and this is where the sky started going up, and this was the sand here. Or we just wanted to straighten it out so the letters aren't crooked like this. What we could do is we could choose the straighten option, and you simply come here and you click and create a relatively straight line going across all the letters. And once you let go, it will show you a crop that has the Jesse Ruben name straightened again, even though it wasn't before. And the reason we're not seeing a part of it is because the crop window wasn't large enough. I mean, we can even do something like this, and you'll see that it'll twist it around. So essentially, you're creating a horizon line when you're using the straighten tool. So if you want this to be your horizon line, this will now move the picture over to be in line with the line that we created. So let's go back. We'll Control Z a few times to get back to our original image. So let's now discuss what these ratios are and the clear, and these options here are arguably the most important part of the crop tool. So when we go to crop, you'll see that it gives you some options. So if you see numbers here, so we can set, let's say 5:7, that ratio will now stick. So if we try to move this around, we'll see that it's going to continue to be 5:7, and if we move it down a bit, it's actually switching 7:5. We can also do it manually by clicking this, and it simply changes, it swaps these numbers. So right now, this is talking about the horizontal line versus the vertical line. If we switch it, it's now vertical line versus horizontal line. So if you hold down the Alt key and then adjust the crop window, you'll see that it adjusts from the center as we covered before. Now there's another way to do this. If you hold down the Shift and you hold any of the handles, it adjusts it from the manipulation handle that you are clicking and dragging on. And this is very helpful if, let's say, we wanted to encompass the SE but not the S, but now we wanted to change the window itself, we can go ahead and change it this way. Whereas if we clicked Alt, it would just expand out the middle. Is this section here. And what this allows us to do is to choose which ratio we want to crop this image in. If we click on ratio, we can choose how wide and how long the ratio we wish to be. So let's say 5:8. Now we can swap these numbers by clicking on the arrow keys, and that will effectively swap the numbers. We can also swap the numbers. If we're dragging down, it actually swaps it as we're moving the manipulation handles. So let's say we're working with Instagram. Let's do a live example. So if we click 1 and 1, because Instagram prefers square images, what we can then do is we can click Alt, we can drag this out, and now I don't want to go below Jesse's legs because then Photoshop won't know how to fill that in. But I do want to go above here to encompass all the letters, and then I want to turn on the ContentAware Fill. And if we click the check mark, we'll see that Photoshop will wisely fill in the area and our image will be ready to go for Instagram. So if I wanted to upload this to Instagram, I could do it any moment. I would probably minimize it a bit because it seems like it's not centered. This looks a bit more centered to me. Boom. This is ready to be uploaded to Instagram. Let's say I was creating a YouTube cover photo for this video that I'm creating, which I'll actually do right now. So YouTube prefers, if I'm not mistaken, 9:16, which I think is a preset here, by the way. It is. So 16:9 is also a preset, which is helpful to see because you can choose any presets here. So if you're printing it, you might choose 8.5 by 11 inches. Now you'll see the PPI, that stands for pixels per inch, and we'll cover that in a second. But right now, I want to stick to creating a YouTube cover for this video. So if I click 16:9 ratio, and then I click the Alt key, and I drag it out because I want to encompass the entire photo, and it's not snapping to the edges because we turned it off. So let's turn snap back on. Let's click Alt again, and you'll see that it should, boom, it snaps right to the end of the photo edges. And I'm gonna fill in the ContentAware Fill. I will hit the check mark, and let's see what we get. So I like it, but I don't think we need it to be that wide. So let's make it like this. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in the logo of my company. So if you click F7 to see the panel, I can simply drag it over to the image. I'll place it there, and I will go to the Move tool. I will move my company logo here. And if I bring up the window, I actually want to make it lower opacity so it's not as visible. And I feel like that's actually a great fit. I'm going to go ahead and save that. Okay, so now that we took that side step, let's go back to the image that we were working on. And I'm going to cover the rest of these ratio options. Now, let me give you an example of what width times height times pixels per inch is. We can adjust all of these values here. We can go in and we can choose one of the preset ratios that doesn't take into account the pixels per inch, or we can go to a preset that does take it into account. We can click on front image and it will simply encompass the entire image, but it's the same thing that C does when we click C. And we can also set a new crop preset that we want to save. So let's say I do this and then I create a new crop preset and I click OK, check mark. So if we now go to the new crop preset, we will see that regardless how we move this around, these numbers are fixed. So regardless whether we crop here or we crop down here or we crop Jesse's face, we're going to see that the inches and the pixels per inch remain the same. So definitely play around with these different features and you'll be able to see the different results that you get. I appreciate you guys watching this tutorial. If you got through this, it's quite lengthy, so kudos to you. I initially learned Photoshop by watching a lot of YouTube tutorials, and I wanted to give back now that I'm fairly competent in Photoshop, and that's why I created this tutorial. If you've enjoyed it, I'm going to be putting out more tutorials like this. Please give this video a like. Let me know in the comments section what you guys thought. Subscribe to the channel, share this with someone else who's learning Photoshop, and I wish you well on your design journeys.